Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Chase Jarvis. Welcome to another episode of Chase Jarvis Live here on CreativeLive. Specifically, you're tuning into the 30 Days of Genius series. If you don't know what 30 Days of Genius is, it's where I sit down with the top creatives and entrepreneurs in the world and create actionable insights out of these interviews with them that you can apply to help you live your dreams in career, hobby, and life. If you're new to CreativeLive 30 Days of Genius, check it out, creativelive.com/30 Days of Genius. All you have to do is go press the blue sign up button, and then we will put an email in your inbox every morning with one of these amazing interviews with a top-notch person who will help you change your life, progress, move. You get the whole picture there. You will know my guest today by the long list of accolades. I'm going to try and keep it short so we can get into the real meat. He is a New York Times best-selling author of the book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and he's actually the CEO of a company by the same name, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. My guest today, none other than Mr. Ramit Sethi.
Thanks for having me.
What's up, buddy?
How you doing?
All right, man, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Super good to have you. You are your second-time visitor.
I'm honored.
And the show's been almost 5 years running. Dang. This one, people know, is not live, even though it's called Chase Jarvis Live here on CreativeLive. But the benefit is that now we can really go renegade it and then edit later.
Bingo. All right, so curse words.
Any of it.
Slurs.
Any of it.
All right, I'm ready.
I won't tell people that it's 10 in the morning. We've been drinking heavily already. I really want to focus this interview on a handful of things. You know the audience is primarily creatives, entrepreneur, people who want to be more creative or more entrepreneurial. They realize that the world is moving towards a freelance world where you're trying to define your own thing. If our parents had one job, we will have five, and the next generation will have five at the same time. So how do we incorporate a rich life, where we get to do the things that we want and still be responsible?
Yeah.
So straight off the bat, why don't you just give a little bit of an overview, knowing that you've been on the show before, and that show's been seen hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times. But give a little overview on how you went from being little Ramit to sitting right here in this chair.
Well, I always say, if I'd followed my default life path, I'd probably be 50 pounds skinnier. I'd be wearing an ill-fitting polo shirt and, like a Cisco technician working in a cubicle right now. And every day I thank God that that's not the case, because I made a couple of pivotal life decisions that took me on a different path. So starting from when I was younger, grew up in a family, not a lot of money, and in order to get into college, I had to apply for a bunch of scholarships. Yeah. Well, I took that first scholarship check, invested it in the stock market, lost half of that money. Not a good move. And
but you thought you were being awesome, right?
Oh, I was 1999, 2000, I'm so cool, I'm an investor. No, I'm not. I don't know what I'm doing. And I started learning about money, and I started learning about human behavior as well. So there are all these things that everybody tells us we need to do. You need to cut back on lattes. You need to work out more. And we know these things, but we don't actually do them. So I'm really fascinated with why. What's the nexus between what we know we should do and what we don't? And so I started writing about money. And actually, from a creative perspective, I tried to teach people for free. Nobody came. Everybody said they wanted it, but no one ever showed up. So it's this is frustrating, but I want to crack the code. So I started writing about it on a blog called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Kind of a weird name, I know. And my friends at Stanford, they started reading it, and then other people started reading it.
It's how it works, right?
Yeah, and no secrets to it. It was just writing material, being consistent, showing up every day, trying to get better. And eventually it sort of expanded. And now, money's an important part, but I think it's a small part of a rich life. Now we have, dozens of employees. We have 1 million readers a month. We talk about everything from starting a business. We talk about finding a dream job, even fitness and food. All the different parts of a rich life.
I love it. And that's one of the reasons that I was very, very particular. Sorry, I've been hounding you. We're both busy guys, been friends for a long time. Like, dude, you're coming on the show. Okay. How about the 23rd? How about the 28th? But one of the reasons that it was a requirement for you to be a part of this particular series is because I feel like what I'm learning about the people who pay attention to me and to CreativeLive is that you're sort of two piles of people, and this is I'm generalizing, but there's the folks, you know, again, I set that up earlier, people who want to live a more creative life, want to be more entrepreneurial, and sort of tap into their dreams. But there's the whole group of people that are kind of they haven't started that process yet, or they think of themselves as like, I need to get out of this particular XYZ that I'm in, whether that's a corporate job or they're in a relationship they want to get out of, and I want to go from 0 to 1. I want to like get started. Yeah. And then there's an entirely other pool of people who have either maybe they're working creative, maybe they're a freelancer, and they say, all right, great, I got this thing, and now how do I make it amazing?
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a different mentality between the two of those. So like to me, that's a great place to start the conversation, because I'm super familiar with your stuff. I have applied the automating of your finances.
Awesome.
But I also know we've had a lot of deep conversations around this like 0 to 1, how do you get started? And then once you start, where do you go? So let's start with the first pile of people. And your background is in behavioral psychology from Stanford. What is the psychology between that thing you said earlier, the people who like, oh man, I want to get fit, I want to do a thing, and how do you go from 0 to 1? So
the best example I know of is a random woman who responded to one of my emails. So I send out like millions of emails every month.
Yep.
And I always say, write back to me, I read every email. And I do, I read every single email that comes in every day. And one of the questions I asked my readers one time.
You're so brave, first of all, that's amazing.
Well, you gotta have a thick skin. Yeah. And after a while, I went from getting hurt to like, I got an elephant hide now. I'm like, man, this is funny, what's going on? And I just, the rule,
going on with you
the
now?
rule of internet trolls is like, don't respond. And I respond to everyone. It's like entertaining. I'm like, you're gonna come into my house? It's like a comedian. Why would you go in and heckle a comedian? Yeah. They're better at this. Yeah. They've been doing it their whole life.
You're about to get smacked down.
So anyway, this woman was not heckling. She gave a real response. I asked people, what's something you claim you want to do, but you actually don't do it? And I think for a lot of us, that could be, I want to start writing a book. I want to redesign my website. I want to get a couple of photography clients. Whatever it might be, there's something we want to do in the back of our head, but we don't do it. So she said, I want to run 3 times a week. And I wrote back and I said, why don't you just run once? And her response was amazing. She said, why would I bother running once? That doesn't do anything. So think about that. Yeah. She'd rather dream about running 3 times a week than actually run once. And so many of us, when we're being creative, we start off saying, I want to shoot Lady Gaga. Well, you're probably not going to do that day one. In fact, you're probably just going to go out and shoot bikes on the street. That's what everybody does.
Or Gary, or your friend.
Exactly.
Hey, stand still, Gary. I'm going to take a picture of you.
Exactly. But we often, so many times, we want to jump ahead. And I see it in so many examples when, we look at somebody's apartment. We look at our parents, their house, and we're just like, oh my God, look, they have everything. They have 3 spatulas. They have 10 different types of pillows. I need that. It's like, it took them 30 years to get there.
Sure.
And sometimes it's okay to start off with a couple of spoons, and you work your way up. That patience, that discipline, that craftsmanship, that's something that I've found separates the best from the people who want to get rich quick.
So if we get out of the get rich quick idea and just realize that the people who are paying attention to this thing right now, let's just assume, because otherwise we could go down a very deep rabbit hole. Let's just assume that they actually want to make those changes. And I'm banking that 90% of the people are in that category of that woman. She's like, why would I just take one picture? Because that doesn't a photographer make. Or why would I, how can I basically get started on something that's sustainable? So what you told that to the woman, and you said, how about running once? And then after you're done running once, run again. So what's the psychology of, and how do you, as a psychologist and someone who helps people do this, how should we think about it?
Well, the first thing is to look at the people who are actually doing what you want to do, the people who are shooting Lady Gaga, the people who are the best at what they do, and actually study them. I think a lot of us, we want to reinvent the wheel. But if I wanted to study your progress, I would say ChaseJarvis interview in Google, and I would read what you've said and watch your videos, and you talk about it. You hustled, you did stuff for free, you learned by getting on the ground, and you'll find this kind of uncomfortable truth that everyone who's the best started at the same level, and yet they had a different thought process. One, they were comfortable and humble enough to start at the beginning. And second, they knew it was about craftsmanship. Instead of, I'm gonna jump from 1 to 1,000, I'm gonna go from 1 to 1.1.
There's a belief that the people who have sort of made it, and again, I think it's fair to say that the people that I have on this show have made it, otherwise they wouldn't be on the show. They've made it in some way, shape, or form. And I am familiar with the concept of people thinking that, oh, you did this, and then I get asked in interviews all the time, what was your lucky break?
Your moment.
My moment, my lucky break. Let's see. And my answer is like, let's see, I think it happened, it's basically about 10 years of busting my ass is the moment.
So I recently wrote a post on our friend Tim Ferriss's site, and I wrote about the $5 million week. We had a week where our business generated $5 million. And that's pretty cool. I mean, a lot of people look at it, wow, what's the secret? What website technique, tool, optimization did you use?
Oh, this magic button.
Yeah.
Just the $5 million
we changed the color to blue and it optimized everything. And so I wrote about it. And I started off by saying, this is the amount. But let's talk about the decisions that made it possible. And there's so many subtle, tough decisions. And I went through all of them. One, I didn't try to do everything at once. So for creatives, one of the things you're going to discover is that everyone has an opinion about what you should do. And if you've ever tried something new, I'm trying to learn a language, I'm trying to lose weight, as soon as you tell people, oh, you got to try paleo, you got to try this, you got to try that. If you start anything creative or a business, you're going to have people saying, you need to get on Twitter, you need to get a Facebook page, you need to do X, Y, Z. We didn't do SEO, Twitter, any of that stuff for years. Years. Why? Because we picked a couple things to be really great at. We took the time to learn it. For us, it's email. We took the time, and if you sign up for our email list at iwillteachtobirich.com, you're gonna see within 3 days, these emails are different than anything you've ever seen. And we spent years learning it. Finally, when we felt pretty good. We felt like, all right, we know what we're doing. Then we added one more thing on. But people right now, they'll tell me like, you gotta do this channel and this and this and that. And I'm like, I'm not good enough. I don't know how to do that yet. So I have a little text document. It's called Do It Later. And I'll just add ideas that people tell me. And maybe every 6 months I'll go and look at it and say like, is it time? And as you get better, your intuition gets a little honed. But one of the things that I learned is just being more comfortable saying no and focusing on just a couple of things that you can become great at.
What's an example for, I guess let me tweak that a little bit. So instead of an example of how to be more creative, talk to me about habits and process. Because to me, there's a list of 10 habits that I do every day. And I know that if I do these 10 habits that I am almost, I generalize and say that I'm my best self.
Yeah.
And the more of those that and it's not like, oh, well, I didn't do one of them today, I missed one, so I'm gonna do 0, like the woman in your example.
Yeah.
But I know the more of these habits that I do, the better I'm going to be. And that's better human, better creator, better husband, better friend, all those things. Talking about habits.
Yeah.
And process.
Love it.
Clearly that's important.
I love it. So Scott Adams, the cartoonist, has a great quote that says, losers have goals, winners have systems. And I'm all about systems. My personal finance book is not about cutting back on lattes or feeling guilty about buying an appetizer. It's about setting up an automation system that runs whether you are there or not, and it just works. Your money goes, it's not emotional anymore, it runs. It's a machine. No big deal. I also was inspired, there's an article in the Atlantic Monthly about Olympic athletes. So one thing that's really different about Olympic athletes is not only are they the best in the world technically, but they have to be able to mentally get in that space right away. Like, they can't wait for inspiration.
Yeah,
they need to just make it happen. So a lot of researchers studied Olympic athletes, and one of the things they do is they have their rituals, they have their habits. So I was inspired by that, and I have my own set of habits. Like you, I know that if I do a few key things, then I'm gonna, as close as possible to guarantee, I'm gonna make that day a successful day. So for me, simple things like starting with sleep. By the way, can I just talk about sleep for a second? Okay, everybody in America is like, oh my God, I need to sleep better. I suck at sleep. I can't sleep well. And it's like, really? There's like 2 main things. If you fix these things, the sleep problem disappears. You don't need a pill. You're not narcoleptic. Give me a break. 1, Stop drinking caffeine after a certain point in the day. Test it. Some people it's 3 p.m., some people it's noon, whatever it may be. 2, stop using the computer towards
the end of the day.
Sleep time.
Yeah.
Now, that's very unsexy to say.
It is.
Very. Whoa, what about this? What about using F-Lux on my computer? It's this cool tool that goes down. No! I mean, you could do it if you want, if it makes you feel better. But one of the things I find in creative life is rather than looking for the gimmicks, look for the things that actually matter. So in habits, sleep matters for me. If I do those 2 things, problem goes away, I sleep beautifully. 2, when I wake up, I don't wonder what to do today. I'm very fanatical about my calendar. So my calendar is laid out, and in the morning I'm more alert and creative, so I do my writing in the morning. And I have a block. Within that block, I double click the link, everything is there. So I just double click and I'm in this document and I'm ready to write. No reference needed, no need to click over here, it's all in one doc, it's right in front of me. Boom, just start writing. And so once that happens, then I have meetings in the day. That's because I'm getting a little less creative and I need to just, do the managing stuff. And then, like for me at night, it's about being social. That's important to me because I work from home a lot. If I don't, I'll turn into a nutcase. That's not good. Gotta get out.
It's easy to do here in New York. Too.
Big time. So like the interesting thing about that is there's no magic bullet to what I just said. Every creative's different. We talked to Tim Ferriss, he writes late at night. I write in the morning. But one of the key things is creatives know their style.
Yeah, you figure out your own.
And you admit it. Yeah. Like I don't feel guilty but that after 6 or 7 p.m. I'm not really in the game. That's just who I am, okay. And so I work my schedule around that.
So one of the things that I'm deconstructing all the time is my peers, yourself, you already mentioned Tim, people who are world-class at what they do. You recommended we do that. And this idea of a series of habits that you get into. And I think this is true for people who want to be more creative or even want to start a business. Like what time can you allocate every day to think about this thing, to do it, to pursue it? And I think I put myself not in the 0 to 1 category. There's plenty of things in the world that I'm doing at 0 to 1.
Yep.
But professionally, I'm in more I know what I want to do. I'm in the 1 to 10. If 10 is Richard Branson, and you and I are somewhere on that between 1 and 10. The idea of carving out special time to pursue that dream, if you don't do that, it's sort of not going to happen. So I actually make that one of my habits, is to do or to make something every day and to give myself some time literally on the calendar to do that.
I love it.
What mistakes, as a psychologist and someone who studies human behavior, what mistakes do people get into? How do they sort of self-sabotage? And what can we do to get over it?
Huge. So I love talking about productivity, but it's like one of these passion projects. I love talking to my friends about it, and then ultimately I come back to my own calendar and I'm like, it's pretty much like it's working the way it should. I'm always looking for that extra 1%, but if I have the bulk of it right, good.
Yeah, it's no silver bullets, it's lead bullets, right? A lot of lead
exactly.
bullets.
Okay, so there's this common phrase: show me a man's calendar and I will show you his priorities. And I'll add a little twist to that: show me someone's calendar and their spending, and I will show you their priorities. So for many of us, we claim that family is really important. Cool. Me too. And I would say, let's look at your spending. Time and money. When was the last time you spent dedicated time flying home to see your parents or with your wife or husband? And what are you spending on, money-wise? It doesn't have to be a lot, but we're talking proportions here. Same thing with fun, with dating, with fitness is a great example. So I wrote this post about spending like a lot of money on luxury services. And people like to talk about luxury, but they don't really give numbers. I want to talk about exactly how much I spend because nobody talks about it. And for me, one of the things is fitness. So I say, look at my time and look at my spending. And if you have a trainer or you're buying organic food or whatever it may be, that really reflects your priorities. Mistakes I see. The biggest one is saying, I really want to do this, and people genuinely want to do it.
Yep, in their hearts.
And then they don't put it on their calendar.
If
you don't have a calendar, that's fine. Start using one. It doesn't, the natural inclination is that I don't want something to control me, right? But the truth is the calendar's under your control. So if you don't want to do something, then that's okay. This is new for people because you're actually starting to respect yourself. And what that means is if I put something on my calendar, I respect myself enough to actually honor it. So if it's on there, it's going to happen. And if it's not, and I sort of skip over it once or twice, then I know there's some kind of internal problem. Like maybe I don't really want to do this meeting. That's hard because it's...
And then you got to deal with that.
Yeah, it's easier to say, oh, the world, oh, I got these emails and it made me so busy and I just couldn't get to it today. Not acceptable. At the highest levels, it's not acceptable. If you don't plan your day, the world will plan it for you.
Yeah, I talk about it in terms of writing. If you don't write your own script, someone will write it for you. And that was the story of my life, actually. I was on a path to do things that everybody else, and they were all great things, but they were all things that everybody else thought I should do.
Yeah.
And it was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to overcome personally. And I'm a stubborn son of a bitch. I'm a type A, aggressive, sort of like do what I want to do, only child kind of person. And I struggled. I let everybody else's messages sort of program me and say, "Oh gosh, you're smart. Well, why don't you be a doctor or a lawyer?" Or, again, you have an opportunity to pursue a career in professional soccer. Well, of course, that's what you're going to do. And when I left all those things, which was very, very, very hard to pursue a career as a photographer and an entrepreneur, it was a major like, what are you doing? You're going to blah, blah. And not from the people that were actually closest to me, but sort of that next layer of friends or acquaintances.
It's amazing the identity you create for yourself, right? Because like it or not, we all crave approval and it can happen in the most subtle ways. So like, for example, one of the things I've noticed is something I call the handshake effect. It's like if someone comes over to your apartment or your house, especially here in Manhattan, and you got a nice view, you got a nice place, as they're meeting you, they're gonna go like this. Wow, nice place. Do you own this place? And this is a pivotal moment. It's a pivotal moment. You don't even know this person. You're just meeting them and shaking their hand. And if you say, I own it, yes, they go, wow, this guy's kind of young. He owns this beautiful place. And you get this approval. That feels good, even if you don't know who the person is.
It's a little shot of dopamine.
Boom. And this is one of the ways that society tells us, for example, that you need to own a house, right? And this is like a very subtle, insidious pressure. And if you don't own it, you're a failure. Ooh. The American dream, blah, blah, blah. Now, I happen to not believe that. I believe that, like, I rent on purpose and...
Because you could just say, like, all right, hey, landlord, I got a leaky faucet.
Bingo.
Because you don't want to have to manage
Or I'm moving to San Francisco tomorrow, or whatever. I'm moving different neighborhoods. The point is, for a lot of us, we are influenced by these subtle things. So your family might say, oh yeah, Chase got a graduate degree, and everyone else is like, if anyone here is Asian or Indian, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And we have to be aware of that, because like it or not, it affects us. And the same thing is true for the creative process. Oof. It's really hard to be creative. Otherwise, everybody would do it. Yes. So let's just kind of be aware of what these subtle messages are. You can choose to accept them. Like I accepted some from my background, which is education's the best, be good to your family, etc. I accepted those. I love it. Others, like you need to be an engineer or a computer scientist, I did not accept.
So I believe that what you just said is perhaps the single largest thing that's keeping people from their dreams. And whether those dreams are in career or hobby or life, that paradigm of not allowing yourself to be programmed is very hard. Right? I just gave my own example of how stubborn and bullish I am, and I lived everybody else's dreams, and I spent tens of thousands of dollars on a graduate school. I was in a PhD in philosophy, because when I decided not to be a MD doctor, I was like, oh, well, I'll just get a doctorate, and it's like second place for my parents. They'll think I'm smart still. And that cost me years of my life. It cost me 50 grand. And only to realize partway through that, like, I want nothing to do with this. Yeah. So if even bullheaded, and I know how I overcame it, but what are some things that you feel like, is it making a behavior? Is it like small steps? How do we go from 0 to 1 specifically on this thing of starting to live your dreams? Getting out of everyone else's path or rut for you.
It's one of the hardest things you could possibly do.
But this is the key, people. Like, this is literally it. Like, you're sitting there right now going, I want to do something different, and my husband's telling me we have a mortgage, I can't do this. My parents are telling me, like, oh man, you want to be an artist. There's a reason they call them starving artists.
Right.
And all that shit is not true. I think there's examples everywhere else in the world of overcoming those things. But help me understand.
So this is a phrase we call invisible scripts.
Okay.
These are the scripts that guide our lives, and they are so deeply embedded that they're invisible to us. And invisible scripts would include things like more education is good. It's very common. In fact, it's so common, how can you even argue with it? Buying a house is part of the American dream. Who could argue with that? Having kids. Everybody's got to have kids, otherwise you're selfish. That's another invisible script, right? And they're very subtle and very insidious. So, so the first thing to do is to think, almost like if you asked a fish, are you swimming in water?
It doesn't understand.
They're just, they don't speak English, first of all, and they don't know what you're talking about. So to actually realize there's a game being played around you. This is a phrase I learned from somebody named Steve Blank. There's a game being played around us, and we can notice it from just looking at the world with a more objective lens, with a more scientific lens. For example, the media constantly telling us that the economy is crumbling, times are tough, etc. Actually, unemployment is way down, the economy's doing great, but you can't talk about that. When I went on book tour, the economy was really in the gutter. It was 2009. And I went to all these different cities. I went to 13 cities, and I went on local news. And they were all talking about the economy is destroyed, etc., unemployment, everybody's unemployed. I said, true, but actually 90% of Americans are employed, and they want to live a rich life. And do you know what they told me? We're not going to talk about that. We need to talk about everybody who's in debt. So the narrative around us is being constructed. Number one, stop and say,
do I want to participate?
Do I want to participate in this? And where am I getting my news sources from, et cetera? That's a huge issue. Number two is to say, let me pick just 2 to 3 people who I really admire. And I guarantee you the people that you pick are going to be out of the mainstream in some way. Like if it's you dropped out of the PhD program on purpose and you became this professional photographer, now CEO. Whoa, that's a very interesting path. What did Chase do to get there? So now I'm Googling Chase Jarvis interview, Chase Jarvis bio. I'm reading everything that you've said, and you basically laid it out there.
I have. Yeah.
You told everybody everything. Now, the information is not what we need. It's actually taking it and applying it to our 0 to 1 life. And that is saying things like, you know what? I always say, should I do X or should I do Y? Okay, and this is one of my favorite concepts. When I was in high school, you get these applications, and there's an FAQ on these college applications. And one of the FAQs was, should I take an easier class and get a B? Excuse me, should I take an easier class and get an A, or a harder class and get a B? And you know what the answer was? I thought it was one of the ballsiest answers I've ever heard. The college said, we always recommend that you take the most challenging classes you can, but in our experience, our top candidates take the harder class and get an A. Yes and yes. So it's not should I do X or Y. If you flip the frame, should I do X or Y? Yes. And the way you get to that is to look at somebody like Chase. I say, should I, be a good partner or should I be a good CEO? Yes. If you can do it, then I know it's possible. And so now I want to figure out how. This is a very different perspective. I'm looking at the best. So number one, I'm studying the best. Number two, I'm saying, wow, they made some decisions and they're doing stuff that normal people don't do. Well, Chase did it. Chase isn't some mutant.
Right.
He might have had a little bit more experience than me. He might think a little differently than me, but he laid it all out. How can I do what he does? I'm going to just take it one step at a time.
Let's dive into that because I think, again, I look at having talked to a lot of, and having had a lot of peers in the game who are high achievers and talked to a lot of people who are in this sort of, like, how do I make change in my life? What you just described, I think, is, let's talk about how to, I guess one of the things that I get the most questions on is like, yeah, but how did you do that? Or, wow, that seems risky. So first of all, I believe that it's probably the first time in the history of the world where the thing that was risky is actually more safe than what our parents would have said. So going to college, the average student comes out of college with a $35,200 debt. that is actually starting to become the riskier path. And so in a world that's trying to get you to be vanilla, nobody that I know who is successful, or I'll even say, not happy might be a stretch, but some sort of intersection of those things that we aspire to: successful, happy, comfortable in their own skin, whatever, took the normal path. The new norm is not normal, and the new beige is anything but beige, basically. So let's talk about how do we how the world looks on that, and how can we resist the world's trying to make us vanilla or beige or whatever.
Yeah, totally. Well, I do think the world tries to make you vanilla. I get it all the time in very subtle ways. People say, I was listening to this podcast interview you did until you used the F word, or I was reading your emails and this is unconscionable, unsubscribe. And I just think, the world wants me to be vanilla. I could stop using curse words, and I could
I don't
stop.
know how, actually. Yeah. I've tried. It's
and
impossible.
My emails would be this short.
Yeah.
And I could dress a different way because they didn't like this beard or this hair, or whatever. And the minute you turn vanilla, the world abandons you. So people will tell you, I want you to do this, you shouldn't do this, you should do that, you need to do that. And the minute you start doing all that, you regress to the mean, the game is over.
I say different, not better.
There you go. It's like a
Different
restaurant.
and better. Yeah.
If you're a restaurateur and you get all these critics tell oh, I hate this, and oh, he served it in the wrong way, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna do what they say, and all of a sudden, you have an empty restaurant. Why? Because you're just like everybody else. I actually think some of my views are a little counterintuitive from a lot of entrepreneurs. These days, it's very popular for people to say, skip college. Nobody needs to get any education. You could just create a life of your dreams online. And I actually believe that education matters. I believe that first and foremost, you need to understand the game being played around you, and you need to win at that game. So people come to me, they're like, Ramit, do you think that I should work on my business or I should get good grades? I'm like, yes. Yes, you should. Yeah. Both. So the best people I know, they got good grades because they played the game. They know the game and they mastered it. And they were like, you know what? I'm going to start a business on the side. And I'm going to start it with 5 hours a week, which we teach how to do. Then you can scale it up to 10 and 40, and you can hire employees if you want, and you can make millions or whatever you want. I think first you need to master the game. And if you wake up, for example, and you're always tired, if you're not in good shape, if you don't have good relationships, you're not mastering the game. So first things first, kind of unsexy.
Base principles.
Base principles, table stakes, get your sleep in order, get your calendar in order, etc. And I'll give you an example. I was at dinner the other night with a bunch of entrepreneurs, and we went around the table introducing ourselves. And one of the questions was, if you weren't here, what would you be doing? Interesting question.
As in here at the table?
Yeah, like if you weren't with this group, what would you be doing tonight? And so people had these different things, and I said that I would be at this hot sauce shop that opened up in Brooklyn because I love hot sauce. There's a woman a couple of seats over, and she said, I live in Manhattan, and if I weren't here, I would be cooking because I never cook, and I'm trying to cook one time per month. Okay.
Per month.
Everybody laughed. Ha ha ha, ha ha, only once a month, ha. I thought she was the most honest person in the room, because I can guarantee you that the majority of people in that room never cook. She could have lied and said, I'm trying to cook 3 times a week. She actually was honest, and she said, I just want to cook once a month. That's success. Declare victory, go home, done. So I would say if you're still at the 0 stage where you're thinking about getting creative, first things first, master the game. Get the sleep in order, and you could say, you know what, I want to go to sleep by 11 p.m. one night a week. Not 7 nights, just one night a week. I want to, maybe it's eating, maybe it's working out, whatever it may be, one time a week. Set a small goal, win, and then you can add to it from there.
I love these core principles are so simple but so powerful. That's the thing that I can't stress enough to anyone who's paying attention right now. And I go back to my personal habit list. It's things on there like exercise every day, eat 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking up. These are very, very simple things that it's the difference between me being very, very high functioning and not. So let's take care, put your oxygen mask on before assisting other passengers. You've heard that in the airline safety videos. is it fair to say this is the same thing? There's a handful of base principles you've talked about: calendar, personal fitness, personal health and well-being. That's table stakes.
Table stakes. By the way, I have to say, I used to ignore the same advice, so I hate myself already.
You hate your
a lot of creatives,
yourself.
like a lot of self-loathing. You know,
There
it's like a blanket you wear. So I would read these interviews with CEOs and all these cool people, and they always ask them, "What's your morning ritual? What do you do to get in the zone?" And without fail, every single one of them would say, "I wake up in the morning and I work out." And I was like, whatever. Like, what software technology do they use? What's their project management tool? Like, I skipped right over that.
It's literally the most critical things, yeah.
I thought I was too smart, and sometimes creatives and smart people have this problem of being too smart for their own good. They want to skip over the stuff that's obvious to get to the novel part. But when I was at Stanford, one of my professors was a communications professor. Now, communications does not get a lot of respect. It's kind of seen as like, just like soft, and the smart people are busy taking computer science. I actually loved it. I was in a class, this was a class on relationships and relational love, and the professor made a really good point. She said, the value in the material you're learning is not in the novelty, it's in the utility. And what she meant was, this stuff that you can apply every day. It's not particularly intellectually difficult.
Yeah.
It's applicable. And so when I look at what I was doing with this productivity stuff, I was skipping over it because it wasn't novel. Oh, I've heard it before.
Everyone says this.
Everyone says it. But if someone had asked me point blank, yeah, but do you do it? No. Because I was one of those guys who read all these books about paleo and Atkins and this and that, but I didn't actually eat right.
In trying to hack the system, you looked beyond the things that were actually just the base core principles.
Bingo. You must get this a lot with people asking you about creative stuff.
All the time.
Yeah, Chase, I know I should take at least 100 photos a day, but what camera do you use?
Literally, they will circumnavigate the part that I feel like is a differentiator. You said take 100 photos. Just if you're making something every day,
yeah.
And even if it's terrible, I literally will, with intention, make something every day. Like, this is the thing that I'm making today. Or I will schedule it in my calendar, like this is the time for making. And I would say, I track these habits every day. I could literally tell you what days over the past 365 days I have not actually made something. It's very, 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 very few. It's very few. Wow. And those are the dirty secrets that people don't really want to know because I think they're always chasing this sort of the sexy stuff.
Yeah.
It's incredible to know how far core principles will get you. So again, the 0 to 1, is it fair to say that it's really about sort of core principles?
Core principles, mastering them. And for me, I'm inspired by videos like Jiro Dreams of Sushi, where the person who creates
documentary film, if you haven't seen it, about a guy who makes the best sushi, and I believe it's his son is a sushi chef in Seattle named Shiro.
Yeah.
Incredible. Super good.
Just to get the rice right, it takes the person years before he's even allowed to do it on his own. Just think about the craftsmanship and the discipline. So maybe you don't want to get to that level. Okay, fine. But table stakes, 0 to 1, master it. Your sleep is under control. And it's not, one of the things I notice is sometimes things are very emotional. They're very heated. Like, I really need to get to sleep, or I just can't sleep. I'm not the kind of person who sleeps well. I sleep, it's just this very heated thing.
There's stories that we're telling ourselves.
Yes, I'm not the kind of person who can go to sleep by 10. We tell ourselves these stories. I used to be, I'm this skinny Indian guy who can't gain weight. That was my story. I told myself, in truth, I wasn't eating enough and I didn't know how to work out. It's so obvious. But I was like, my genetics.
You look great, by the way.
Thank you. So the stories we tell ourselves, we want to interrogate those and say, I'm probably not a freak of nature. I'm probably not a genetic freak. If Chase can do something, I can do it. Let me break it down. That's 0 to 1, master the basic behaviors, and then you're ready to talk about the advanced stuff, and that's where it gets really fun.
Sure. Well, let's hold in reserve the advanced stuff, and I want to go into Ramit the human for a little bit. What's something about you that most people don't know that if they found out they would be surprised?
I think that. Man, I have a pretty open book. I feel like I'm at a disadvantage when people meet me. I tell them everything.
It's all out there, just naked.
I tell them everything. The thing that I think would surprise people is how uncomfortable I used to be, and in some ways still am, about like the things that are embarrassing. For me, it was little things like
Clearly being skinny.
Skinny was a huge one. Oh, huge. And you can see this a lot, like going to the beach or something like that, and kind of people not taking their shirts off. That's a big one. In fact, I know a lot of my students who are weight loss instructors, and one of the things they notice is a lot of women who are mothers, they won't take pictures with their kids. So they have almost like years of their children on the beach where they're not in the pictures. Why? Because they didn't want to be, they were embarrassed. That's really heartbreaking, and I experienced that. Same thing with these scripts I told myself about, meeting women, or like, I got to focus on studies. I don't want to be shallow. Working out, that's shallow. Those things. Even the music I listen to, which is like horrible, like late 90s R&B. I mean, actually it's amazing. But I used to like not talk about it at all. What I learned, which I'm still in the process of learning, is once you get comfortable with it, like I like Jodeci. I'm gonna admit that. And then you can actually kind of own it. And so that's been a process. Like I actually do write about listening to Whitney Houston at the gym, but I think there's still other things in my life that I probably am embarrassed about still that I don't share.
If there's a takeaway from that, it's that everybody has those things, and the way I feel like the best creatives that I know think about it is those things that were quirky and made you weird as a kid, those are huge strengths now.
Yeah.
And if you can own that stuff, like that is, not only does it help you move through the world, feel good about yourself so you can get on to thinking about the things that are going to help you live your dreams, but owning it in a sort of public environment it sets other people at ease, because it reminds them that you're just like them.
Yeah.
Like there's sort of this approachability around it. So I'll remember this about the Whitney Houston. I think that's okay. So that's a Ramit-ism that we know that you like Whitney Houston, and you haven't admitted it or maybe you've written about it, but our audience.
I love her.
How about something that you want to do, but you personally haven't yet started to achieve?
Oh wow, this is great. So
we could go for years, I'm sure, because we all have big dreams.
Yeah.
But just give us a couple of simple ones. And I'm trying to do this so the folks at home realize that Ramit, super successful, has done so much. New York Times bestselling author, he's a CEO, making $5 million in some weeks, but that there's still stuff in your life that's undone.
Definitely. So I think for me, like one of the things is I remember being asked to MC a wedding, and I turned it down. That's like a pretty big honor to be asked to MC a wedding.
Yeah.
And I just know that I don't have that kind of style. I'm not the kind that can get that crowd riled up. And I believed that. And I think to some extent, if I'm honest, I still believe that. But I know in the back of my head, that's just a story I'm telling myself. That actually I could learn the skills.
I think he would crush.
I don't think so. I mean, like right now, I'm telling you from where I'm sitting, like I love hanging out with you. I love hanging out in a small group. But like on the mic, it's not me. And I see this glimmer in the back of my head where I'm like, I think I'm just telling myself a stupid story. So I'd like to get to that point, and maybe it involves taking a stand-up class, maybe improv, who knows?
Powerful.
Yeah, but that's something that it's like here, and I'd like to bring it to the forefront.
And one of the things that I love about talking to people like yourselves who have done so much is that you actually, if you applied these rules that you're sharing to the world, which is actually what you will do at some point when you decide to prioritize that.
Yeah. That's a great lesson too, is that just because you know these lessons doesn't mean you always apply it yourself. And I'll be the first to admit it. I know how sales, marketing, persuasion works. I still get persuaded all the time. I mean, I have people who use my own negotiation strategies against me. I'm like, oh shit, all right, that's pretty good. Just because you know it doesn't mean that you're immune to it. And I think that's actually comforting. That's the human condition, is that just knowing something isn't enough. And as you said, like prioritizing, I have a lot of people who are a little bit older than me. And the advice they give me is get more spiritual, yoga, etc. Now I thought a lot about it, because if all these successful people are telling me this, there's probably something to it. And what I decided was that at this point in my life, I'm not into that. And that's okay. but I also know enough to know, like, probably
At some point, it's going to come back.
yeah, like I'm not different than anybody else. I'm pretty much the same, like 98% of the time. So I bet you one day you're gonna see me coming in doing some leg thing with yoga and namaste, stuff like that.
Tim Ferriss, we've mentioned a couple times in this talk already. He's part of the series. That he was asking me, like, dude, you're all zenned out and you're killing it. Like, what's up? And I was like, oh man, I started meditating like a couple years ago.
Oh shit!
And
now you're gonna tell me to meditate.
I'm not gonna go because I just said it without saying it. But Tim tells a funny story of not wanting to. Ironically, there's this weird twist that goes on in meditation, is that most of the people who I know who've done, achieved a reasonable amount of success, and this is a story that we tell ourselves, part of how we got there or did that thing was because of our relentlessness, our always on, hard charging. And so this was a story that Tim was telling himself, and I was like, well, maybe think about it in terms of just try this thing, and maybe you'll realize that that all of that stuff that you thought actually got there was actually an anchor. And so Tim started meditating.
Wow.
His shit just took off. And it was me and Rick Rubin who were like beating him up, and now he's like, all right, I figured it out. So the thing that you think got you there might actually be something that's holding you back.
It's very humbling to realize, because if you actually get into that zone, you might realize that what you thought for the last 25, 35, 40, it was actually wrong.
Yeah.
And there's a guy named Michael Ellsberg who tells this great story about how he once he'd been sort of unsuccessful with dating. And he went to...
really well.
You
get the
eye contact thing. Great book.
Yeah.
And so he went to a dating seminar for men, and they put all these men on stage. And after interacting with the crowd, they put these men on stage, and people from the audience, in particular women, stood up and told them what they thought of them.
Wow.
He said there were grown men crying because, some of these men were told, you come off as really creepy, you are not fun, you're boring, etc. And Michael said, what I had thought for 25 years was wrong. And these men are crying on stage. That moment, there's something powerful there. How do we get to that moment? How do we look at what the world sees of us instead of just what we see through our mind's eye? I'll tell you, one of the scariest things ever is to go and ask a couple of close friends and say, you know what? I'm trying something new. I'm trying an experiment. I'd love to get your help. Would you be open to giving me some feedback? Yeah, of course. I'd love for you to tell me.
I'm going to do this on you right after the camera stops rolling.
Tell me one thing that you think I'm good at, or something that I do differently than other people. I'd love to hear it. And also, I'd love for you to tell me one thing that you think I should improve. That's sort of the surface level way, all right? That's going to get you stuff like, you're always organized, you're always on time. And if there's one thing you can improve, it's like, you've talked about wanting to change your clothes, and maybe it's time there's a sale at Ross. Okay, sort of generic stuff, right? Now,
then there's the next level.
You want to probe, you want to get that knife in there and twist it and say, okay, appreciate it, I'd love to go shopping with you, but I'm actually trying to, personally, I have a feeling that, I'm not that approachable, that sometimes I'm mean, sometimes I'm two-faced, stuff that we all know there's stuff in the back of our mind that we don't like about ourselves.
Very aware of ourselves, sure.
And so you give them the space. And so you say, sometimes I think
things more like this, not where to get my clothes.
Bingo.
The same is true with creatives, for example. Like if you really want someone to look at your work, and you need to invite it, and that's I start out by saying, will you review my portfolio? I'm like, all right, I really only have one mode. And that's the super honest mode if I'm going to review your work.
So they say, let me guess, they say, yeah, I want you to be honest. And then you are honest with the pros and the cons, and then what happens?
Their eyes are like, wow. It's very hard for them to take in. And that's because we identify ourselves with our work, and the ability to put a little bit of distance there to turn off the narrative, and if you can actually lean in and ask for this sort of feedback. You're talking about it in human terms and relational terms. I'm talking about it in reviewing your work, but there's obviously a huge tie there. Invariably, I would say I get a handful of notes every single week that says, you told me X years ago, Y years ago, and I believed it, I learned from it, and now Z is happening.
This is music to my ears. So there's a complete lack and absence of people telling you the truth in your life. And you know what? I totally get it, because now I've gotten a little older, I have friends, and basically, it's crazy to say this, but the more and more I get older, the more friends I have, the more I realize that it's probably better to just be nice. Why stir the pot? Why tell them the truth? Oh, I didn't really like that chicken. Nah, chicken was pretty good. Oh, I had a great time. See you next time. Why? Do I really need to be Mr. Honest Ramit? And this is kind of a story I told myself. What I've realized is that the cost, the social cost to telling someone the truth if you don't like something is so high that it's easy, it's almost crazy to tell them the truth. So if you want it, you gotta like rip open and just be like, please.
Sure, and being nice is a nice quality, but also this is trying to tell you, if you really are looking for hardcore feedback on a way to make your art better, to help you get from 0 to 1 starting your thing, then you have to double, triple ask.
Because they won't tell you. People, they have opinions and feedback, but you ask them the first time, they're gonna say, oh yeah, your clothes. Oh, you ask them the second time, oh, your shoes. The third time, where you open yourself up, maybe, just maybe, they'll tell you the truth. Here's a good exercise I learned from a great guy, author named Marshall Goldsmith. He said, you know, Ramit, do you believe it's important to ask your employees about how happy they are? I said, yes. You know, he said, this. He said, would you do the same thing in a relationship? Would you ask a girlfriend or a wife, would you just text them and say, how can I improve as a boyfriend? How can I improve as a husband? Or for people watching, how can I improve as a girlfriend or a wife or a daughter or son? How many of us have ever done that? None. So if you're watching, pull out your phone and, per Marshall Goldsmith's advice, text your partner, your mom and dad, your kids, and say, what could I do to be a better dad? Just one thing. I mean, the trepidation of just putting that, I mean, think of how vulnerable it is.
For sure, it's very
If you can do that with your partner, you could do that creatively.
Brene Brown talks about there's no creativity without vulnerability. And for the artists, that the people that oh man, I love this person or that person, or they talk about hard things, and they don't walk around like crying all the time, like they're a normal human. You know, they can conduct themselves, but at the appropriate moment, they'll go there, and that's that sort of human connection component, and I think the ability to learn. So now we went into you a little bit. I want to go back to not from 0 to 1, but from 1 to 10. So if 0 to 1 was very much about sort of fundamentals and productivity and getting the basics together, starting to create something every day, or how do I actually spend not my 9 to 5 but my 5 to 9 learning about this business that I want to start online. What is 1 to 10? What's the next phase?
This is in my opinion, it's more exciting. It's more challenging. So, because the basics are sort of, you got those, you handled it. It's like brushing your teeth. It's not a question anymore. You just do it. Now you get to take these exciting ideas and start to implement them and grapple with some cooler things. So for us in our business, you know, the first thing was like, for me, it was like, how do I write stuff where people actually care about what I have to say? Okay, I learned that. How do I create a product that will sell? And I sold a $4.95 ebook. We talk about this in our other video on YouTube. Incredible. I was just terrified. And you know, there were all these people saying like, screw you, maybe if this were 30 cents, I would buy it. And we talk about the psychology of valuing yourself. So at a certain point, we created a product on freelancing called Earn 1K. And that thing did really well. I think when we first launched it, it generated something like $600,000. So I was like, I had no idea that it would ever do that well. And that's when you realize that you're playing at a different level. And boy, this is when things get interesting. One, the habits that got you here are not going to get you there.
Not the same habits. You can't just keep getting sleep.
Totally. You can't
become a world-class performer.
Yeah, exactly. Sleep, it becomes something that instead of like your goal, which was up here, now it's just a tool that you utilize. You utilize sleep, etc. The things I used to do, like I was working with somebody on my team, and I asked him, like, we had this big launch, and I wanted to continue growing. And I said, you know what, I need you to step up and be more strategic. Now, he didn't really know what that meant. To tell you the truth, I wasn't really sure what that meant at the time. But I said, come back with a plan on how we can grow. And after a week or two, he came back with a plan that said, we need to change paragraph 2 of this email because the copy isn't quite right. That's not strategic. That's
Tactical.
That's tactical. I might have done that 2 years ago, but when you're operating at a different level, now you're talking about business model. You're talking about breaking your business down into things like traffic, conversion, sales, or whatever your business model might be. You're looking at the competition. I asked my dad, who's an engineer, no surprise. I said, Dad, if you were to take like an engineering exam right now that some college senior's taking, do you think you could pass it? I was just curious. I like to ask the masters if they could do the beginning stuff. And my dad thought about it. He said, probably not. I don't know the formulas anymore, but I have the intuition and I know of faster and more efficient ways to problem solve. And when you go from 0 to 1 and then 1 to 10, you may not be as technically inclined. For example, I don't even know how to send emails to our list anymore, but I have somebody on our team who does that.
It's very complicated responses or something crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I have the intuition to know if this entire sequence is going to be effective, et cetera, et cetera. So giving up control is something I struggle with, something I'm working on, but keeping your eye on the bigger picture, which always gets bigger, and you just start to grapple with bigger and bigger meals, that is something that ends up being 1 to 10.
So, oh yes, thanks. Top off our water.
Thanks a lot.
You saw me reach for it twice, didn't you? You're good. You're good. Thanks, Maddie. Let me get a little sip here. So, on our path from 1 to 10, I felt like for me that 0 to 1 was really about learning how to learn.
Yeah.
And then 1 to 10 was just a constant cycle of realizing that the next level required me to learn this skill set, and then I was able to apply my sort of method of deconstruction and how is it going to work for me, and then application over and over and over. So tell me if you think that's true, that you need to learn how you learn or how the best people in the world learn, and then from 1 to 10 it's about rapidly learning. So do you agree with that? And B, tell us a little bit about how you have applied that principle.
Yeah, I think that the way we say it is for creating an online business through Growth Lab, year 1 is just learning to crawl, year 2 learning to walk, year 3 learning to run. And that's accelerated. For some of our products that we create, it takes us 2-3 years of research to even show it to the public.
Wow.
So I believe in a longer time span. Jeff Bezos says, we're more patient than anybody else. That is a virtue that few people have. And I think that that's really special. So 1 to 10, I also think you're looking at taking, one of the most important and challenging parts of 1 to 10 is you're actually already pretty good at the basics. And so this is where it gets really tricky. Staying humble becomes increasingly hard, really hard. I'm gonna give you an example. I met a bunch of people who are in the online marketing world. Tell you the truth, I don't really hang out with most of these people, but I was in the room and one of my coworkers was there and we all went around the room introducing ourselves. And I told my coworker, I said, watch how people introduce themselves. They're gonna say 2 things. 1, how much money they make, and 2, how little time they spend on their business. Why? Because that's sort of
that combination shows success.
Yeah, I'm so successful. And my coworker goes, no way. I go, watch. The first person who introduced himself goes, I have this business called blah, blah, blah.com, make $600,000 a year, work 2.5 days a week. And I'm just looking at my, what'd I tell you?
That's right.
And I actually found it just horrible because I want to work more because I love what I do. And money to me, that's not the success factor. That's just a byproduct. What I learned is that the people who were in that room had a really difficult challenge because they had created an identity of making a lot of money and not working that much. Well, guess what? When they saw someone else, bingo, they put themselves in a corner. When their friends started doing more than they did, now they're stuck and they have this cognitive dissonance. I want to make more, I want to be more successful, but I make pretty good money and I live on the beach. You know what? I'm just going to kind of stay here. And now they've painted themselves into a stagnant corner. So as you get more successful, I have a number of people who email me all the time. They're like, Ramit, I don't know, this course seems a little too basic for me. I don't know, should I join? And I go, what's your business doing? What kind of revenue? They go, we're making $70,000 a year or $250,000, whatever the number. And I think to myself, this material helped generate millions and millions of dollars and millions of readers. And you think you're too advanced at 70K or 250K or whatever? You take a look at any of the greats, they still take photos every day.
Yep.
They still practice their dribbling every day. I still buy $10 books, I still buy $1,000 products from people whose businesses are a fraction the size of ours. Staying humble is really hard.
I think that's a huge, huge advantage if you can. Ironically, I was just talking to Sir Mix-a-Lot, Anthony Ray, talked about coming up through hip hop and in the 80s and 90s. People, I mean, that's when like MC Hammer,
Yeah.
you got the NWA, you got these huge hip hop groups, and the ones that have stayed humble and stayed hungry are the ones that that because that's the underscore here is stamina wins.
Yes.
Stamina is one of the most underappreciated, undervalued. I think it goes to whether you're trying to be more creative or create a business. Being sort of diligent, being in the hunt, and my trainer, I'm going to give him a shout out, Dave Warner. He's like, Chase, you were a college athlete,
Yeah.
and you push yourself very hard. You know how to push your body to extreme limits. We're not going to do any of that here. We're not going to like crush, get injured. It's not 3 steps forward, 1 step back. It's just 1 step forward, but
Love
1 step
it.
forward every day.
I love it. It's so rare to say like, we're gonna,
It
you know
was one
what?
of the hardest things I've ever, the last 18 months,
Yeah.
were one of the hardest things I've ever done. And Dave Werner at moveskill.com, has specifically rebuilt my shoulder in a way that everybody told me I've had surgeries and all that kind of stuff. Wasn't possible. Now I'm doing handstand push-ups. I used to not be able to put my hands above my head. It's specifically because I just did something every day that moved the bus forward.
Why was it hard for you?
Because I want to sprint. I want to come. Oh, what's possible? What is possible from a human potentiality on that scale?
Yeah.
I want to put myself in that little quadrant. And the reality is that all of the people who are there, most of them got there through this sort of long, sustained pattern.
Look at the way that you're talking about it. It's understanding what victory is, and sometimes it's for that one moment in time outworking everyone else, and you need to be able to burst and do that. And sometimes it's taking the years-long perspective, and that's really hard. And you need to know when is the right time for which one.
For sure, there's
really hard.
There's a fair bit of subtlety in that, but that's also learned if you're in the game every day. Brene Brown talks about being in the arena. You can't actually criticize someone who's not in there every day doing the work. And she keeps a list of a very few number of people in her wallet, is what she describes it, and she only, like, ultimately those are the people that she cares if she lets those people down.
Yeah.
And there's a whole nother class of people that if you're in my field or you're in the public eye and you're criticizing me because you've actually been in the arena, she's got a great quote, I think it's Theodore Roosevelt, she knows by heart. It's called The Man in the Arena, you should look it up. Then she will listen to your criticism.
Yeah.
And if you're not on the list of people she cares about, and you haven't ever put yourself out there and done the kind of work that she's doing and other people who are sort of making impact in the world are doing, she just doesn't have time for the haters. She's just going to work every day and doing her stuff. So I think there's a fair bit of takeaway there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about let's just now pretend we're somewhere on that scale, the 1 to 10. And all these are pulling from your principles. So this particular principle I'd like to talk about is sort of self-valuing and how the market looks at you. That's one of the things, again, our video that we've done before, let's maybe put it right here or right here. We had a great interview, and it was much more tactical than this one is. I think folks should go watch that as well. But let's dip our toe in the shallow end of the pool here for a second, because I think there's a lot of value in how you position and value yourself in the marketplace.
One of my mentors is a guy named Jay Abraham, and love this guy. He has, without a doubt, the biggest vocabulary of anyone I've ever met. I mean, whenever I talk to him, I have a notepad, I just write down the words he uses. It's unbelievable. So he's a very experienced marketing legend, and first of all, on the point of being humble, I read his $10 book, and every Wednesday I carve out the entire day just for strategy. So I have a list of things to read. I sit on my couch. Sometimes I go to a coffee shop. Sometimes I take a couple of meetings, and I just think big. And truth is, most of those days, nothing comes out of it. Maybe once a quarter, I get an idea.
A game
and
changer.
yeah, and maybe 2 times a year, those ideas are good. So maybe 2 ideas a year, but they're really good. So I have to kind of go through the mess to find the gems.
Process.
Yeah, and I read his book, and it gave me this idea that turned into a very successful product. Well, I knew I had to meet him, and I went to his website, signed up, applied for one of his programs where I had to submit references. And I was like, man, it's been like 15 years since I had to do this. I had to like get reference letters. Like, who do I even ask?
I love it.
And he accepted me, and I had to fly to LA 15 times over 15 months just to get 45 minutes with him.
Wow.
He changed the way I think about business and the way I communicate. He teaches a concept of teaching the market to revere your work. And so many of us don't do this. So the most common thing when you see products and services out there, they'll say, buy my ebook, or I'm a photographer, wedding photographer, and if you sign up today, it'll be 30% off or 50% off or buy one, get one free. And I think to myself, and I think, that's not the game I want to play. The game I want to play is I want to spend a ton of time doing my research, front-loading the work, creating the best product. And if I believe it is the world's best, and if I know that because I've tested it with people and I got feedback,
Yeah, you're in that world.
why on earth would I discount it 50 or even 15%? There's no reason. You never see like a Mercedes commercial, you never see them yelling. Never. Think about that. A used car commercial, yelling. A Mercedes commercial, enjoy our 300 horsepower S500, the most luxurious vehicle on the road. Completely different. So the question is, who do you want to be? There's nothing wrong with being a volume business like McDonald's. That's an amazing
McDonald's
business.
or Amazon, it's all about price and
Incredible.
margin. Yeah.
But that's
$3 billion.
a business model. Think about everything embedded in that strategy. If you want to be a luxury model, or a model where you're serving a few customers at the high end, which is more of our business and your business as well in many ways, then you would not discount. You would create the world's best product. You would offer an unbelievable guarantee because you stand behind it, and you would back it up. For example, when you join our products, you're not allowed to join our flagship courses if you have credit card debt. That decision costs us millions.
I love that gating. Yeah,
Yep.
That's great.
We're very clear who we're for, who we're not. When you join any one of our products, you're going to get a phone call from a live person. And sometimes you'll get 2 or 3 calls throughout your experience just to make sure you're doing all right. Can we help? Can we hook you up with anything? That's a luxury
That's next
model.
level.
Yeah. And we're not playing the McDonald's game, but we don't have the strengths that a McDonald's might have either.
So, man, I guess one of the things that stuck with me about that last interview that we did was in positioning, how to talk about your work, which is something that I see people, especially people who haven't gone from 0 to 1, you're just trying to figure out your thing, get into the core principles. But when you have had your first gig, you get a gig, you made it, like if you're a photographer, you shot your first wedding or you got your first portrait commission. From that point forward, talking about how you see or how you fit into the marketplace is something that most people are very, very uncomfortable with. I think it's fair to say that if you don't actually master the skills of talking about your profession and specifically how you see the world and the way that you're better and different, you're not going to get there.
Super subtle.
It is. Is it fair? Can you comment on that?
I love the way you're saying it. So most of us don't think about the market at all. When we go to pitch a client, all we're doing is like, oh, I hope that they get this, buy my stuff. And so we are, first of all, necessarily scarcity minded. We're thinking that if I don't get this gig, then I can't pay my photographers, my this, my that.
Yep.
Okay, so you've already lost the game before you ever walked in. And that is a very humbling thing to realize, that you already lost before you walked on the field. So we want to eliminate that. And the second thing is...
But how, Ramit? I'm so scared.
Yeah, I'm going to show you. The second thing you said, which we'll dive into, is talk about how I'm different than the marketplace. Now, what does this mean? It means that if you're the potential client and I'm the photographer, I need to walk in knowing that you are a smart guy and you've probably evaluated, you're probably talking to 3, 4, 5 different people. So I need to acknowledge that. I don't want to BS and think I'm the only one and you should buy my stuff or you're gonna die. No, you have a lot of options. They're all good options, right? If we're talking, you have good options. Let me tell you how I see the world, and I'm gonna help you understand the lay of the land. Because the client, you have to serve them and help educate them on the market. They don't know photography or online business or whatever like the expert. So let's say I walk in and I'm a photographer. You know, what I would not do is say, here's my photos. You can see that I really highlight the bride's face. She looks so beautiful. And if you sign up today, there's a 30% discount. You're a commodity. You're like sandpaper. There's a million I can go buy at Home Depot. Get the hell out of here. You haven't made a connection.
Like that's just a great, like you're like sandpaper.
Now, if I walked in and I said, you know, first of all, I really appreciate you taking the meeting. I can tell you that I took a look at your RFP, I took a look at your website.
Your XYZ, whatever.
I'm very excited. I think that there's so much we can do. First, I'd just love to know a little bit about where you are in your process. How did you find me? Tell me about what a dream wedding might look like. Wedding, engagement, whatever.
Just to be clear, I've never shot a wedding, but it's a great example.
Yeah, we'll make it up.
Because it's like I can have 1,000 of the biggest art directors standing behind me, but the mother of the bride will never face that woman.
Perfect. So make it the example you want,
Sure,
and we'll make it up on the spot. And so now the potential client, the prospect is, they're really telling me. And sometimes they might be like they're gonna be super expressive and talk forever. In that case, you gotta wrangle them. Sometimes they're just gonna be kind of like terse. Like that's how I would be. I'd be like, this is what I'm looking for, you tell me. And you need to vibe with them. Then I might say something like this. I'd say, you know, you have a lot of different options when it comes to a wedding photographer. You know, there are some photographers who are amazing at ethnic photography. For example, if you were doing an Indian wedding, I would recommend blah. If you want to capture blah, 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 I would recommend X. But here's what I specialize in, and here's the way I see weddings. Okay, let's pause right there. What did I do?
There are other people in the marketplace that if you're not the thing that I'm the best at, you're going to want to go to them. So you're sort of deferring for this. I mean, you tell me.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Abundance mentality.
Yeah.
And I'm being a valuable service to you. I'm telling you.
Adding value. We haven't even done any transactions yet. I'm
Yeah.
adding value to you.
I'm educating you on the lay of the land. How would you know that this person's the best? You're just a prospect. You wouldn't know. But I know. And I'm going to tell you what they're the best at. Okay.
And then, but if you're looking for someone who, and then you match the thing that you know that they need more than anything because they just took a minute or two and told you, then I think that would be fantastic.
That's amazing. And sometimes you need to be honest and say, you know, I don't think we're the best fit. Yeah. So for example, if somebody comes to me and this happens, by the way, like literally 20 times a day. They're like, Ramit, I'm down to my last, 2 months of money. I need to make money. So I need this online business to work. And this is the phrase they use. I don't have time to waste. I don't have time to waste on stuff that might not work. And you know what I tell them? I say, I really appreciate it.
You should go dig a ditch and get paid. Like, go get $20 an hour.
Oh yeah, another thing that entrepreneurs or so-called entrepreneurs really, really hate. Like they'll go, Ramit, I've been running this business for 3 years. I made $540 in profit total over 3 years. I need this thing to work. And I go, can I give you some honest feedback? They go, I welcome it. And I go, I think that I would recommend you get a job to start. And once that job is stable, then you can think about that. And you know what they go? F you, mother effer, because their identity isn't as an entrepreneur and the idea that getting a job is a failure. Okay, so back to this. What I might say is, well, you nailed it exactly. This is what I'm doing. If what you told me was something I'm not great at, I would say, I actually don't think that this material is right for you, or I don't think my services are right. I actually think you should talk to John Doe, and I would be happy to make an introduction. But if they said something that, like, for example, if they said, I want to have 4 photographers because I want the perfect lighting, the perfect this, the perfect that, and they're talking at a premium level, that's the world I live in, then I'm gonna say, I'm glad you mentioned that. look at this, and I open up my briefcase technique. Google it. It's so powerful. So you open up, you know, in this engagement, I did this, and we couldn't afford to miss the shot because we had a rock climber, and he was only gonna do it once. And so we had a helicopter, we had this, we had that, and you can see the perfect shot, and this was in the National Geographic. And then this, and this person, they're just sitting back, and they're like, just salivating.
Yeah, they are.
And finally, and this is when you know you succeeded, when you have connected, price is a mere triviality. And we talked about that in our previous video. But when I work with the best people, they don't ask about price. The worst, the people who I don't want, the first question they ask is,
how much does it cost?
How much does it cost? And what is the refund policy? Now, we have a very generous refund policy, but if your first question is about that, you will refund. I already know it. I know it for a fact, mathematically. Now, if you say, tell me about how you're different, here's my situation, could you help me? Those are the best. And if they say, I'm willing to spend the time to create a business, I know it's not gonna be easy, but I'm ready, I'm like, welcome in.
Man.
So that's how you know if they're right or not, versus going in and begging for a few dollars.
Don't do that. So we've already referenced our earlier video that you and I did on this show a couple of years ago. It's very, very tactical. The briefcase technique, how to sort of position yourself in the marketplace. There's a ton on that. You have a great class on CreativeLive called How to Make Money for Creatives that, again, very, very, very tactical.
Super, like the exact words to use.
A script.
If the client says this, you say that. Like it gets down to the nitty gritty.
Didn't you have people like maybe even in the class calling in, like they would go away at lunch and you'd say how much they could get their credit card debt reduced or something like that?
Yeah.
And like 50, just with the script that you gave them, like 50% of the people got their credit card reduced or something. I don't remember what was great. So, and then on the high end stuff that you do so well at I Will Teach You to Be Rich, products like Zero to Launch. There's a whole range. Is there any particular product that you steer people towards?
Yeah, I would recommend that they go to growthlab.com/400K.
Okay.
And
number
400K.
Okay.
And what that is, it's going to show you one of the campaigns that we use to generate over $400,000, and it really breaks down the psychology behind it.
Great.
Whether you are creating an online business or you're a creative doing services, that's going to show you some of the psychology that's not very obvious on the surface.
I love all the psychology that underpins how to go from 0 to 1, how to become a successful entrepreneur, creative, how to live your dreams. And again, this is not only for people who are trying, you can do these things to be a solopreneur or an entrepreneur. You can do these things and use these techniques inside of a company, but how do you think and behave entrepreneurially and creative? And when I say creative, I mean creative with a capital C, like all forms of creativity, not just painting, design. You're at Ramit everywhere, pretty much, right?
Yep, Instagram, Twitter. You can find me, just search my name. I'm out there.
You're out there. Anything that you want to leave us with?
You know, I think for the first time in our lives, we don't have to wait for gatekeepers. And in the past, it was, if I want to write a book, I have to wait for some New York agent to call me. If I want to create a business, I have to wait for some big funding. And I think what we talked about today was recognizing that there's no gatekeepers except one, and that's in our head. And if we can get the basics right, the stuff that's sort of unsexy that no one else wants to talk about, the sleep, if we can get the automation on the money, if we get that stuff right, and you can find all that at iwillteachyoutoberich.com or Growth Lab for the business, man, you are setting yourself up for great, great success and for a rich life. So don't wait. You don't have to sort of think of jumping from 0 to 1,000. Start today.
And it's literally the first time in the history of the world where we don't require permission to do any of these things. I think you said it best. There only is one blocker, and it's us.
That's right.
My man, much gratitude.
Thank you, man. Great to see you.
Always. The guy just delivers. It's like he's a machine. Like a robot. Energizer Bunny. That's it. I got to wrap up. Signing off. Thanks so much for tuning in. Stick around. Don't forget to press that blue button at 30 Days of Genius if you're just coming here for the first time. We will put one of these powerful interviews with equally powerful people. I don't know if there's anybody who's equal to you, but there's a lot of powerful people out there in the world, and we're talking to in this show. We'll put it in your inbox.